What if I told you that the most prolific female serial killer in recorded human history was not a monster from the shadows? She was a countess. She lived in a castle. She was educated, powerful, and wealthy beyond imagination. And for decades, nobody stopped her. Not because they couldn't, but because they were afraid of her name.
Are you certain you want to hear my story?
This is the true story of Elizabeth Báthory, and I promise you, no horror movie has ever come close to the reality. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 in the Kingdom of Hungary into one of the most powerful noble families in all of Europe. The Bathory family was untouchable. They had kings, generals, and bishops in their bloodline. Elizabeth herself was highly educated at a time when most women could barely read. She spoke 4 languages. She was considered one of the most beautiful women in Hungary. At the age of 15, she was married to a count named Ferenc Nadasdy, a celebrated war hero known as the Black Knight of Hungary. He was older, frequently away at war, and largely absent from their home, a massive castle called Čachtice, sitting high in the mountains of what is now Slovakia. Elizabeth was left alone in that castle for months and years at a time, and in that isolation, something inside her began to change. The first disappearances began in the 1580s. Young girls, peasant girls mostly, daughters of poor local families, started vanishing after taking jobs as servants at Čachtice Castle. In those days, working for a noble family was considered an opportunity. Families were eager to send their daughters. The pay was decent, the alternative was poverty. They had no idea what was waiting inside those walls. Elizabeth Báthory had developed a fascination with pain and punishment that went far beyond anything that could be explained. Former servants who escaped described beatings so severe that the wounds never healed. They described girls being kept in cold dungeons for weeks, fed barely enough to survive. They described hearing screams at night that the castle walls could not contain. But Elizabeth was a countess, a Bathory. Who would believe a peasant girl over the most powerful woman in the region? Nobody did. For years, nobody did. The legend, and historians still debate how much of this is fact versus myth, is that Elizabeth Báthory became obsessed with blood after witnessing a servant girl being beaten so severely that blood splashed onto her own skin. According to the story, she believed that where the blood had touched her, her skin looked younger, more radiant. Elizabeth began bathing in the blood of young girls. She believed it would preserve her beauty, keep her young, make her immortal. She had a network of servants and accomplices who helped her. A woman named Anna Darvulia, described as a witch by locals, who was said to be Elizabeth's closest confidant and the architect of her darkest rituals. There was also a woman named Urzi Majorova and several male servants who procured victims and disposed of what remained. The castle had a chamber, a room that servants refused to enter and that was kept locked at all times. What happened in that room was described in testimony as beyond the imagination of ordinary people. For years, the victims were peasant girls, poor, invisible. Their disappearances were noted but not investigated with any urgency. Elizabeth was a countess. The local authorities looked away, but Elizabeth grew bolder and greedier. She began operating what appeared to be a finishing school, a place where noble families could send their daughters to learn etiquette, music, and courtly manners. It was considered an honor to be selected. Families from across Hungary sent their daughters willingly. Those daughters never came home. When noble girls began disappearing, the situation changed. Noble families had voices, Noble families had connections. And the complaints began reaching a man named Gheorghe Thurzo, the Count Palatine of Hungary, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. He was also Elizabeth's cousin. For years, even Thurzo had looked away, but by 1610, the evidence was impossible to ignore. The emperor ordered an investigation. On the night of December 29th, 1610, Count Thurzo led a group of soldiers and officials to Chaktica Castle. What they found when they entered has been described in official documents that still exist today, preserved in archives in Hungary and Slovakia. He carried an official order issued in the emperor's name, granting him the authority to search every chamber, every corridor, and every hidden room within the castle. Elizabeth Báthory received him with remarkable composure. She neither fled nor protested. She simply accepted the document and stepped aside. They moved slowly through the endless stone corridors, opening one heavy wooden door after another. Room after room, they searched in silence. The deeper they ventured into the castle, the darker it became. None of them knew that, hidden behind those ancient walls, they were only moments away from uncovering one of history's most infamous secrets. They found a young girl dead in the main hall, fresh, as if she had died only hours before their arrival. They found other girls in the dungeon, alive but barely, emaciated, covered in wounds. Some in states that the official documents describe only as unspeakable. She was arrested that night. In the days and weeks that followed, investigators searched the castle and the surrounding grounds. They found bodies. They found remains in the dungeon, in the courtyard, in the fields nearby. In some cases, they found only pieces. The trial of Elizabeth Báthory's accomplices began in January 1611. Her servants, Anna Darvulia, had already died by this point, but the others were brought before the court. They confessed, in detail. The testimonies lasted for days. What they described in that courtroom shocked even the judges who had seen war, plague, and famine. They described girls hung upside down and drained of blood, girls kept in cages barely large enough to hold them, girls burned, frozen, bitten. Elizabeth herself, witnesses said, had a habit of biting her victims. The official count of victims reached 80, but testimony from witnesses and survivors suggested the real number was far higher. One document, a list reportedly found in Elizabeth's own handwriting, recorded 650 names. 650. The accomplices were executed, burned alive and beheaded. Elizabeth Báthory herself was never formally tried. She was a noble. You could not put a Bathory on trial like a common criminal. It would destabilize the entire social order. It would embarrass the families connected to hers. It would raise too many uncomfortable questions about how long this had been allowed to continue. Instead, she was walled into a set of rooms in Chaktica Castle. Servants bricked up the doors and windows, leaving only small slits for food to be passed through. No light, no human contact, no trial, no execution. She lived that way for 3.5 years. In August 1614, a guard looked through one of the slits to pass food and found Elizabeth Báthory lying face down on the floor. She was dead. She was 54 years old. She was buried quietly. Her name was forbidden to be spoken in Hungary for over a century. Here is what makes this story more disturbing than any fiction. Elizabeth Báthory operated for decades in a castle with the knowledge of servants, local officials, and nobility who either didn't ask questions or actively chose not to see. She killed, by conservative estimates, more than 80 people. By some accounts, more than 600. And she was stopped not because someone was brave enough to act, but because she ran out of victims she was allowed to take. When she started taking noble girls, the game changed. When the poor disappeared, the world shrugged. She is listed in the Guinness World Records as the most prolific female murderer in history. Her story inspired the legend of the vampire. Researchers believe that stories of Bathory's blood obsession traveled across Europe and mixed with existing folklore to create the figure we now know as the vampire, the beautiful, immortal noble who survives on the blood of the innocent. The castle of Chachtica still stands today, in ruins, on a hill in Slovakia. Tourists visit it. They take photographs in front of the crumbling stone walls and post them online. Most of them don't know what happened inside those walls. Now you do. The scariest monsters in history were never supernatural. They were human. They had names and titles and castles, and they lived among ordinary people who chose not to see what was right in front of them. Elizabeth Báthory was real. Her victims were real, and the silence that allowed her to continue, that was real too. The next time someone tells you that true evil announces itself, remember her name, Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess.